Hello, welcome to Mythbusting, Gentle Parenting. My name is Dr. Karis John. I'm a Senior Specialist Educational Psychologist for Social Emotional Behavioural Difficulties with the Tonnau team in Mythbusting Local Authority. And today I have with me is Ellen Barrows, who is a trainee educational psychologist. What you will notice on this page here is that we have a QR code where you can gain access to our live recordings. So this podcast today is recorded live with parents from Neath Port Talbot who are able to listen live and then ask questions at the end of the session. So for those of you who are watching or listening to this via YouTube, please feel free to scan the QR code so that you can join us live and then be able to ask us questions. I hope you enjoy today's session, and please join us for our future sessions, and also check out our YouTube page for additional Tonnau talks that we've done in the past. So today we are going to myth bust gentle parenting. So the reason we've done this today is that we've seen that there's a lot of parents talking about gentle parenting and also sort of querying how that can work for their own families. Also, there's a lot of myths out there about gentle parenting and what it actually means. So that's why we're doing the session today, because we think it's very relevant for our parents when we see how much there is out there on gentle parenting, but also those misconceptions too. So I'm wondering if we could try and understand what gentle parenting is, Ellen.
Yeah, I think absolutely. There's so many misconceptions out there. If you are online and you use any form of app, there's so much access to on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, basically about gentle parenting, and everybody has an opinion about it. And some of those things seem largely true and helpful, whilst others definitely come across as misconceptions. So, a lot of the work around gentle parenting kind of started in 2015, and a woman called Sarah Ockwell-Smith wrote a book and titled it The Gentle Parenting Book. And so a lot of information for gentle parenting has come from there, and some research has been done to extend on that, which we can talk about in a bit. But I wanted to read the definition that I found from the book that I think for me feels like the most helpful way of recognising what it is. And that is that gentle parenting is an approach to raising children that prioritises things like connection, empathy, respect, validation, and positive discipline. So we'll talk a bit about those in a minute, but it emphasises really the importance of fostering a safe and nurturing environment then that meets a child's emotional needs, but also provides those clear and consistent boundaries, and they're the most important aspect of gentle parenting. So essentially it's based on a mutually respectful sort of parent-child dynamic. It's a bit of a mouthful, but that's for me about like the best definition for what it is.
Okay, so gentle parenting as a term came from a book named, obviously, Gentle Parenting in 2015.
Yes.
So obviously that's relatively new that we would consider in terms of parenting styles and approaches that we've had over the years. So ultimately what we're finding though is that people who may have read the book or people who may have just seen the book have taken this term gentle parenting, and obviously it's been open to interpretation on platforms such as Instagram, TikTok, where other users and obviously viewers of these these different videos that people may be putting up is kind of given the wrong idea of what this book by Sarah Ockwell-Smith, what she actually meant in terms of gentle parenting.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of people have their own ideas about what it is, or have seen small clips and have kind of run with it and assumed it's something that actually it was never intended to be.
Okay, so I think then that's a good thing that we're actually myth busting it today, because obviously I think what is happening in this day and age is that people get a lot of their information from Instagram,
Of course, yeah,
and TikTok and all those videos, seeing short clips of information as well, and actually it's often not based on fact or research.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously this book that may have originated from by Sarah Ockwell-Smith is actually what we're going to try and explain. So to try and myth bust those things that people may have seen on the, social media.
Yeah.
You mentioned there, you try to explain what gentle parenting means.
Yeah.
There was a lot of words there.
There was a lot.
There was a lot of terms there. You mentioned that gentle parenting is an approach to raising children, okay, that prioritizes connection, empathy, respect, validation, and positive discipline. Okay, so let's ask a bit more about respect, because I know respect is a term that a lot of adults may find it difficult to kind of show to children, because there's that old term, isn't it, that a lot of old generations may have used, like, I'm not going to give you respect as a child until you've earned it,
Yes.
and I think that is something that maybe a lot of us as parents may have heard in the past, and also it's difficult, I think, for children these days to feel respected, and we use it a lot. And I'm just wondering, what do we mean by respect?
Yeah.
When it comes to parenting?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think even the word respect in terms of being a parent is a new concept. And it is difficult when you feel that you are the parent and you are in charge, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And what we mean by respect, essentially, between a parent and a child is that as a parent, you would be demonstrating that child that you accept them as they are without judgment. So it's unlikely that a child is going to talk freely to you if they believe that they are being negatively judged or that you are making negative judgments about them. So it would be your role as a parent then to communicate to them and demonstrate that you have a lot of acceptance for them, whether that's a positive emotion they're displaying or negative. So regardless of the circumstance, you would show and communicate acceptance.
Okay. So are you saying then, in terms of respect, it's like, not using those age-old, criticisms such as, like, what do you know? You're just a child.
Yeah.
And
in some ways, I guess that's true, because children don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And what you would be doing by demonstrating acceptance is modeling respect. So
Yeah.
you would, if you are expecting that same respect back as a parent, then you would have to model that first.
Okay.
Because they are children who are still learning.
Okay. So maybe respecting them in a sense. So instead of saying, what do you know? You're just a child. It's like saying, look, there's a lot that I need to teach you about the world, and that we're going to learn together.
Yeah.
And I understand that you don't have the same experiences yet, and you'll develop that. This is how we're going to learn together.
Yeah.
In a sense. So I guess that's a good way of thinking of respect, is still being that leader and that teacher, but it's not being critical or judging, as you said, in the sense of, you don't get this, you're only a kid.
Yeah, and I think you could probably use the word respect and acceptance interchangeably.
Yeah.
They very much mean the same thing in this context.
Okay. Because the other things, such as connection and empathy, connection is about having that kind of emotional support and being, that trust, and also that relationship, to be, to have kindness and all of that. Empathy, again, that's a big word that we talk about, but it's about being able to understand someone else's perspective, someone else's feelings, to be able to not have the same feelings. Or empathy is not that, but it's respecting and being able to understand why someone might be feeling that way.
Yes.
And then obviously we've got validation. So that, again, we've talked a lot about validation in the past in our other Tonnau talks, where we validate children's feelings. It's like saying it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to feel angry.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
That's validation. Okay. Great. Okay, so it's good that we're doing this, because there's so many misconceptions about gentle parenting. Tell us about one of them.
So one of the first ones I wanted to mention is that there's a lot of information kind of online again, and I think a lot of the myths come from an online platform because of how frequently we use the internet and things like that. But one of them is that gentle parents is a permissive style of parenting. So essentially letting things go, where parents say to their children, no matter what you do, it's fine. And that it doesn't matter. They can do what they want, say what they want at all times, and there's no consequences.
Okay.
And that's not true. It's not a lazy style of parenting. It's not permissive. It is a case of setting clear boundaries with your child, but doing it with empathy and positive guidance and that kind of acceptance that we just talked about.
Okay. So one of the misconceptions is that gentle parents are lazy or permissive, as you said. So permissive being a parent that kind of lets things go. Maybe a parent that says, "Oh, they're having a tough day, so I'm gonna let that slip." Oh, they don't want to tidy their room, because they don't know how to, or they can't do it, or they're just not listening. So I'm not gonna push. I'm not gonna put those boundaries in. So it's a kind of permissive parenting style is kind of like you say, letting things go and not challenging children on things. And I think the word challenge can sometimes be seen as quite a authoritarian approach, where actually a challenge would be questioning that and also putting in those boundaries. And I guess, how would you set those boundaries with empathy and positive regard then?
Yeah, I think the word boundaries in this context, as well as part of gentle parenting, basis of that is making sure that you provide clear explanations for why you are setting your boundaries. So your child understands what the boundaries is, it's clear, but also why you're expecting that boundary. They have further understanding as to why it's important. So
it's like the reason that you're given that boundary.
Yeah, which often when you're in a rush and when you're in a hurry and you're overwhelmed and your child is overwhelmed, you don't tend to do. But in this context, so you might say something like, "Don't open the front door in the house unless I'm there with you." Now, as an adult that that's to keep them safe. But your child doesn't necessarily know that. So an extension of that, if you were to gentle parent, might be that, "I know you love to open the door, so you're recognising why they do it. It's something they enjoy and you like to see who is there. But this is really important because I don't always know who's knocking the front door and I want to make sure that you are safe and I can only do this if I'm with you." So you're providing that further explanation so they understand why it is you would need to be there for that reason in that situation.
Okay. So in a way then, so to be able to put in a boundary with empathy and positive regard and guidance is about explaining the need for it. I need you to be safe.
Yes.
So instead of, I do hear a lot of parents in old sort of quotes, isn't it? Like, "Do as I say, not do as I do." And again, kids don't understand why, because as we've talked about in previous episodes, is that children learn from what they see around them. Then they don't naturally, without intent, develop these skills. It is through what they see adults around them do and other children. So it's really important that we consider that whenever we are putting in those boundaries, we put in an explanation of why. And it's not that we are explaining ourselves to a little child and the importance of it. It's we're helping them to understand why it's important and the purpose of it. And again, that's really important for parents to do that and not think, "Well, no, I'm putting the boundaries because I'm the parent and I'm putting the rules in." It's about helping our children to understand, why certain things are there and also the importance of it, and they're more likely to follow it then, isn't it? I think that's the key here. Is that they would be more likely to apply that then in the future.
It's like you were saying, if you were to say something like, "If you open the front door, your iPad goes for a week." And while that is a clear boundary in some ways, without the explanation, that child probably can't make a link as to why opening the front door would lead to having the iPad taken off them. The same as if that was the consequence for lots of different actions. That child's understanding of why that is unsafe in the first place is not there because you haven't explained it to them. And it's unlikely if it's something they're doing regularly, they don't know that it's unsafe.
And also, we're talking here, really, this is a boundary that you put in for a smaller child rather than 11, 12-year-old. And I guess for them, they see you opening the door without that concern, because you don't want to put that on them. You don't want them to think, "Oh, I'm worried about who's behind the door." So you will open the door and be like, "Hello," and so they see that as a positive interaction. So again, they won't see that there is a risk to it. And again, they may open doors in the house. So how is it different? They open the back door, but obviously how is it different from opening the front door? And I think sometimes we need to explain these little things to other kids because they don't automatically understand that, do they?
And they wouldn't. And
No.
that's your role as a parent, isn't it?
Yeah.
To provide those kind of learning experiences for your children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering then, so we talked about one of the myths being, it's lazy parenting style. So what other myths are there?
I see really regularly, especially on TikTok, people making videos, things that say, my child's not gentle, so I can't gentle parent a non-gentle child. And might be a video of their child kind of having a really exciting time, maybe throwing shoes or whatever. So that leads us on to our second myth, that gentle parenting is not appropriate for maybe children we might describe as kind of strong-willed. But there's plenty of research out there, and the book that we've just been referring to, that does demonstrate that gentle parenting can be done with any type of child if you use the strategies correctly. It can be effective for everyone. So even those children that you might hear described as kind of pushing their luck, or they're a bit stubborn, or maybe strong-willed, there are still opportunities there for you as a parent to connect with whatever emotion they're feeling at that time, and offer them choices.
Okay. So in what way does connecting with your child's emotions then help them?
So when you're connecting with your child's emotion, and as hard as it can be sometimes, especially when they're really big emotions, things like anger, for example, is probably the most common one, we're helping them understand and manage their feelings in a healthy way. So you are role modeling that to your child, especially when they're much younger, when those feelings kind of take over. They may not know why, but as a gentle parent, you would recognize that your child has had their own experiences and feelings, and that it's your role there then to be open to hearing about them, because their world is so much smaller than ours. Something that may seem like a big deal to them, they can't open the lid on their drink, for example, is actually the biggest thing happening to them in their world at that time. And it can be hard as a parent to recognize that, because we are dealing with different things that seem bigger, of course. But to that child, you would be putting yourself in their shoes and understanding that actually this is really distressing for them, or it's really hard for them. And it's hard, but you're modeling that to them.
Again, this is one of the things, it's really important to consider, is about, connecting with your child's emotions, because often kids are seen as overreacting.
Yeah.
A child may, show a meltdown or tantrum, whatever you want to call it, go on a strop because they can't get the lid open, or just because they, can't play with their favourite toy at the time, or, that they're getting frustrated sitting and waiting. But again, it's about us understanding that, what you said is that they have very little experience compared to us. Their brain isn't developed in a way that can be patient, can problem solve, can emotionally regulate. And that's what we need to do as parents, is develop those skills in their brain. That's how their brains will develop over time with the right support. And that's why, like you said, it's so important that we help children connect with their emotions, because emotions are very challenging things to feel sometimes, especially when they're big emotions. And we know with our kids that they do feel emotions quite big, and they can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I think, if you think back to the last time you felt extreme anger, it's not a nice feeling, or extreme worry or fear. It's not a nice feeling, and our children need us to be supported when those things, those big emotions happen, because it can be quite upsetting and frightening.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, when, us as parents really do need to connect with our child's emotions, to help label it, name it, for a start, explain, I can see that you're really frustrated. I can see you getting really red in the face, and you're stomping your feet.
Absolutely, because a child might not recognise that.
No.
They may not recognise that that's what they're doing. When they're feeling such big emotions, it tends to override the brain. They're probably not logical thinking at that point, problem solving for themselves. And that's your role as an adult, is to help them do that, so that next time they experience that big feeling, you've already role modelled to them how they can problem solve their way through that. And hopefully, as they develop kind of into those teenagers and adult years, they have the skills to be able to do that independently. Not all the time.
No.
You don't.
And again, you need to be doing this with your teenagers as well. So even though we're talking about gentle parenting children here, your teenagers also need it too. But we're saying here, it sounds like parents need to be very patient and understanding at all times, which I know is hard, being a parent myself. Is that right? Is that
I think that leads us kind of onto our next myth, that life has to kind of be largely perfect, or sunshines and rainbows, whatever, to be a gentle parent. And again, I'm taking us back to a lot of kind of the myths I've seen are online, and there's videos that go around of people who are kind of romanticising gentle parenting in a way. They'll post a nice video of their lovely, clean, tidy house and their children having a lovely hour playing to themselves while they're baking, and they've managed to gentle parent and teach their child how to regulate their own emotions. And that's just not an accurate representation of real life. When is life ever that easy for anyone? Parenting is a testing and hard thing to do. It's 24-hour constant. And I think even people who can be described as maybe the most gentle and patient people will experience frustration and sometimes confusion when you're parenting, especially, you know, this is your first time here as well. It's a child's first time here. You're working it out largely together a lot of the time. And gentle parenting doesn't have to be done constantly. I think that's really important to remember. It is there as a guide. It is there to help you understand how to create a strong connection with your child, that hopefully will help them navigate, like we said, the times later on in life where life is challenging, but also for you, the times when parenting is most challenging, when your children are so dysregulated. You have a guide there for how to help them through that.
That's really good to hear, because, you know, I always say, you know, in our previous Tonnau talks, is about before we even begin to put in strategies with our children, we need to first check in with ourselves, because you know, life gets in the way. You know, I want to be the best parent I possibly can and use this gentle parenting approach, but actually I'm feeling really frustrated today, or I'm feeling really low today, and I'm struggling, and I just don't have the patience. And I, you know, and I think that's really important for us to reflect on, is that, there are going to be days that we're going to find harder than others, and that actually, you know, just being present with our child, and, you know, being able to say to them, I'm struggling with this at the moment, you know, I'm finding it hard today to put in the right measures for you, and I'm going to have to think about it, you know, because that's okay for you to say, do you know, you know, as much as I want to do the best job I possibly can, I'm going to have to take 5 minutes here. You know, absolutely. And I think that's really important for us parents to remind ourselves, is that it's not always going to be easy, and it's certainly not going to, life is not perfect. And as much as we watch these videos on TikTok and Instagram of these perfect parents with their perfect lives, and have their children all sat around the dinner table eating dinner and all talking about how wonderful each other are, that's not reality, because we know siblings fight, you know, we have bad days, you know, and you know, it's nice really to actually consider that, in theory, gentle parenting could work for everyone.
Yes, you know, it doesn't have to be all the time, like you just said. You have to be able to be patient and have time in yourself, and if you don't have it, you don't have it all the time. You're not going to. And I think, like you said, that's one of the myths, isn't it, is that being a gentle parent means you're a perfect parent. And that's not the case at all, because no one is. Even if you gentle parented 24/7 and it was as perfect as it seemed, even then you would still find it difficult.
And also, can I just put something else on there? You know, as I say, you know, children learn from us as adults. Now, if I'm gentle parenting 24/7, which would never happen because I couldn't possibly human. However, how is my child going to learn resilience? When I talk about resilience in our previous Tonnau talks, it's about understanding that our children have to learn from us. Okay. Again, resilience is only developed through overcoming adversity, overcoming these challenges. Now, if I'm not showing my child that I'm having a tough day, okay, and that I need to put in other measures in order for me to be the best version of myself that day, then our children aren't going to learn resilience. Because they'll always just see as our parents as looking up to us and going, well, they're perfect all the time. I'm not perfect all the time. So I'm not a good child. I'm not a good person. I'm never going to be a good person. Whereas when we say to our kids, do you know, I'm having a tough time today. I'm not as resilient as I was, or I'm not coping as well as I was yesterday, because, you know, the car wouldn't start, and, you know, I was late for a meeting, or, you know, I couldn't get you to school on time, and that was really frustrating and stressful. I think, again, I wouldn't recommend that we be perfect parenting all the time,
Absolutely not.
Gentle parenting all the time, because it's not realistic, is it?
No, it's
So
not.
I think it's important for us to share with our parents about the fact that if you can show your children how to cope better with difficult emotions, then they will be able to learn from that.
Absolutely. And I think that's a key aspect of gentle parenting, is that first and foremost, you're a model, and you're a model for the good and the bad.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So how are we going to gentle parent then? Let's talk about some of these strategies. How would we do this?
Yeah, so I think, like we mentioned earlier, we as a gentle parent would prioritise the things like connection, empathy, respect, validation, and positive discipline. And hopefully by doing this, we're creating that safe and nurturing environment that would meet our children's emotional needs regardless of what they are, because we've got those clear and consistent boundaries in.
Okay, so yes, that's quite broad, isn't it?
Yes.
Talking about prioritising connection, empathy, respect, validation, and positive discipline. That's a lot
to think about. Yeah.
It is a lot to think about. So is there any way we can understand this from that, from a more of a parent's perspective here?
Yeah, I think, sort of simply put, gentle parenting is an approach to try and understand the world from your child's perspective.
Okay.
So what that means then is trying to see things from your child's point of view, thinking about why they might be behaving in a certain way, what's happened that day, what's happening right now. Because we know that parents always say, like, oh my God, they're driving me crazy.
Yeah.
And while they might be, that could be largely true. They are driving you crazy.
Yeah.
What are they trying to tell you?
Yeah.
Are they saying mum 500 times a day? It's quite likely that they're doing that because they need your attention. For whatever reason, they're looking for that direct attention from you. So their behaviour, we've talked about this on other podcasts before and YouTube videos before, that their behaviour is a form of communication.
Absolutely.
And while it might be really frustrating, they're trying to communicate something with you, essentially.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just thinking then, in terms of, how you sort of phrase these things, is talking about them in a way that is explaining the behaviour, understanding the frustration that they may have. What I've seen on on Instagram and TikTok videos is gentle parenting, as the myth goes, is kind of showing videos of, oh, I'm gentle parenting my child, and they're saying things like, I can see you're annoyed, I can see you're frustrated, but you mustn't hit your sister, okay? So kind hands, be gentle. How do you find that as a technique for gentle parenting? Because I think what is missing there is the boundary.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the explanation.
Yeah.
So while, recognising that you can see how they're feeling and pointing that out, I think is really helpful, like we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
Telling your child kind hands seems like a great strategy. But what does kind hands mean? What does that mean to a child? A child needs to know that kind hands mean, if you hit your sister, that hurts. And when you hurt your sister, she's really upset. And I'm upset when you hurt your sister. To have kind hands, you would hold your sister's hand, or you would very softly, and you can demonstrate how soft to touch someone by rubbing their hand, for example. I think that further explanation is always needed, because we know what it means. As adults, we know what it means. A teacher knows what it means. But if a child has never done it before, then they don't. And so you're kind of half gentle parenting there. You've got the start right. But
the importance of those boundaries.
So important.
Because this is the thing, that we see these gentle parenting videos on social media, and it's not gentle to parenting, it's completely permissive parenting, as in they may be saying, oh, come on, inside voices, gentle hands. They'll have a child who is maybe hitting them, and getting really frustrated, and they're going, oh, okay, I can see you're annoyed, gentle hands, gentle hands. And again, that's not gentle parenting, is it? Gentle,
be permissive, as you said.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we need to sort of show here, is like there's a lot of videos out there that suggested the gentle parenting, but it's really, what that is doing is actually, children need boundaries,
100%.
There's so much research done on, the fact that children actually respond really well to boundaries and limits. As much as some children may push limits and push boundaries, actually they feel far safer within very clear and very firm but kind boundaries and limits. They've done so much research, haven't they, in the past, years ago, letting children just be feral in a sense and come up with their own, rules. Yeah. And actually, what happened in those, and bringing a group of children together, what happened is that children automatically sought guidance from the leader of the pack. So even though it was still a child, they sought to have those boundaries put in place.
Yes.
So actually, naturally, children do want those boundaries and limitations. And it's important for us as parents to be very clear on that and try and stick to them as much as we can.
I think so.
Don't get me wrong, sometimes boundaries and limitations need a bend. They do, but with explanation, I think
that's fair,
Yeah.
And boundaries will change as children grow anyway.
Yes.
They will never stay the same.
No.
Like we said earlier, the 1 minute you're asking your child not to open the door on their own because they're too young and stranger danger, but once they turn 18, that boundary will probably change. You'll probably be sending them to go and open the door.
Yeah.
But that's where the explanation comes in, as we've said before, and you will know your child's limits and they'll be different for you as they would to someone else, But I think, like you said, that it's the boundary that's the important part. If you were to take your child to the park and they were throwing stones or sticks at someone, and you said, no, enough, stop, or we're going home. Okay, you've set a boundary, but the child doesn't necessarily know why.
Yes. Yeah.
So they may continue, they may not believe you until you further explain. If you throw stones at someone, that hurts. And when you hurt someone else, we will leave the park. And that's a clear and consistent boundary. And I think that's a fit, in my opinion, as a gentle parent, that would be a fair, clear and consistent boundary to provide.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really important to reflect on is, in the park, for example, I know parents can really struggle to set boundaries when other people are around.
Yes, it can be embarrassing.
Yeah, and often I get a lot of parents saying, it's different when we're in the house. I can put boundaries, but when I'm out, that it's like the children know that
they're watching you.
They know that you're not going to be able to set those boundaries. And I've been there myself. It's hard, isn't it? Because you're like, they've got that cheeky little glint in their eye and they're thinking, I can push these boundaries a bit more because there's lots of people around. So I think that is a really good technique to say, to get down on their level, holding their hands, making sure they're looking at you and saying, listen, you need to listen to me now. This is really important. What I'm about to tell you can really affect what we're going to do next.
Yeah.
What I'm about to tell you could end in us leaving. So that you get their attention. I think a lot of kids can be very distracted and very excited when they're at the park. So, for example, doing things like pushing in front of others, using the equipment dangerously, throwing sticks or stones, running out of the park gates. That's, we've got to think about a lot of the boundaries that we implement outside of the home are for safety reasons.
Of course.
Kids don't know that.
No.
And again, we need to, make sure that they understand I'm being very serious now.
Yeah.
So it's really important you listen to me, because now what I'm about to say could end up with us leaving the park.
Absolutely.
So listen carefully. Yeah.
And I think you can set them before.
Yeah.
If you know you're about to go somewhere that's so exciting for your child that they go in to get overstimulated, they're going to be running around, they're going to be doing things that they probably wouldn't do in the house.
Yeah.
Before you go, you can set those boundaries.
Yeah.
And you can get there, remind them.
Yeah.
Remember what we said before we came in the park, and reiterate the whole boundary from start to finish.
Yeah.
And if your child is continuing, then you follow that boundary.
That is one of the biggest things, isn't it? Is following through with the boundary. The amount of times I've heard parents say, if you carry on, we're leaving, you do it one more time and we're leaving. And then I hear, if you do that again, we are going to be leaving. And I'm thinking, how many times have they said,
why have you left
do that again? We're going to be leaving. So make sure whatever boundary you're putting in place is something that you can follow through with.
If you're sat having a coffee with your friends thinking, I'm not going to leave because I'm enjoying this, then don't set the boundary.
Yeah, absolutely.
The boundary can change, and it can be, if that carries on, you come and sit by me for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
If that's what you can follow through with, then absolutely, it has to fit both of you, essentially. It can't. And I think even though it's called being a gentle parent, you might feel like a harsh one, but you're not.
Yeah.
You are being clear and consistent.
And again, when we talk about boundaries and putting harsh boundaries, sometimes we can be really frustrated with our kids because we may have said, you do that again, we're going to have to go home, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
You do that again, I'm going to take your iPad off you for a week. Okay. We need to be mindful or of the boundaries that we're putting in place, that they are reasonable as well.
Of course,
because, for example, if I say, right, stop doing that, otherwise you're not going to, Caitlin's birthday party next week. If you carry on, that we need to be mindful about that the length of time of putting in, say, a punishment.
Yeah.
And the effect of that punishment being carried out is quite harsh.
Yeah.
When we've got to be mindful when you're thinking about, what you mentioned about, the principles of gentle parenting is about respect, is about compassion as well, and validation, and empathy. We need to be able to understand that children are going to have moments many moments actually, where they are going to become dysregulated.
Yes.
And that is not a choice of theirs. It is it's the way the body takes over the mind, in a sense, and they don't have control over it.
No.
Children aren't manipulative, they're not controlling. However, their behaviours can be seen as that.
Yes.
And it's not their intention. They're not built that way. It's the way that the chemicals in their brain are overloaded, and in a way that they then respond in that way that can be seen like that. And I think that's really important, just to put that in there, that we don't want parents to implement boundaries or restrictions that are sort of unfair in that sense.
And it's really difficult to connect with your child after all of this. If you say you're not going to a party next week, well, the connection really is not going to work if you do it a week later.
No.
Because life has happened in that week.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think I agree with you in that if you want, there's going to be a boundary in place and there's going to be a consequence. It needs to fit what has just happened. So like you said, leave in the park if you do something in the park that's inappropriate. Yeah. And that's fair.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. I think especially the younger the child, the more immediate the boundary and the limitations need to be put in place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, when we're thinking about our teenagers, because gentle parenting teenagers, that's a different kettle of fish, isn't it?
Tell us about it.
They're very different, aren't they? And I always look back on the things that we talked about in, Understand the Teenage Brain, which is on our YouTube channel. My gosh, we could talk about teenagers forever and still
not understand
even though we were once teenagers ourselves. Yes. And how different are we now? And that's the thing with the teenage brain, is that when you've got a child who is like, you're 7 and 8 and they're all for their parents, aren't they? And want to spend time with you and do stuff with you. When they become a teenager, it's all about their peer relationships, which is normal. That's meant to happen, as much as it can be difficult for us parents to kind of see them kind of fly the nest in that sense. It's like, go out there and valuing the relationships of their peers rather than their family members. That's quite challenging. And as parents, we can find that quite hurtful. And I think that's really important that we understand that, in the sense that it's not meant to be. A teenager still wants love from their family. They still want acceptance. They still want empathy. Even though their facial expressions aren't saying that to us, they still need the support and care and love of their family and their parents. And I think that's really important for us to mention, is that, gentle parenting still applies to our teenagers, because they need that respect. They need that compassion.
It may just look different.
Absolutely.
Doesn't mean you're not doing it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think with a teenager, you've got more chance of negotiation. Okay. Say pre-teens as well. They love a little bit of negotiation.
They're very clever.
Oh, absolutely. And one thing I'd be saying, especially with our older children, is be open to that. I think that's really important. I think that's an excellent skill that they're developing, is in terms of, okay, you've put this boundary in, but I want to negotiate the terms of that. And I think we shouldn't be saying, no, I'm the parent, and it's either that or my way or the highway.
Yeah.
That's not going to have that's not showing respect for our children. And I think certainly our older children, we need to be open to allowing, some kind of negotiation, whether that's, school holiday, bedtime, Wi-Fi, access, negotiation is really important. Staying at friends' houses, how long they're out for, I think that's really important when it comes to gentle parenting. I get that you want to stay out with your mates till 10 o'clock, but actually that's not safe.
Yeah.
And it's really important to me that you're safe.
Yeah.
But I am open to negotiating the boundaries that I'm putting in place. And I think that's something we need to be mindful of when we're considering gentle parenting, is how we apply different techniques to our teenagers in order to help them grow as adults. Because,
well, of course, you want them to develop more skills as they get older, and they're not going to do that if the same boundaries in place from when they were 4.
And again, what we want them to be able to understand is that boundaries can be negotiated, because the last thing you want is your child as an adult to enter relationships where they accept everything. And that's not okay. And we need to make that very clear to our teenagers, to help them understand safety and also respect in themselves and others. Because what we don't want then is our children either being accepting other people's boundaries, firm boundaries without negotiation, or setting boundaries on others, and saying, this is how it's going to be, because that's how they were parented. And I think it's really important that we want our teenagers to grow up to be adults who respect others and themselves, who are able to develop connections with others, healthy connections
100%,
with others as well. So I think, this is essential for all age groups.
I agree with you.
So tell me, what are the benefits of gentle parenting then?
So we've discussed some of the benefits of gentle parenting, but the research kind of suggests that the following, and this is obviously not going to be 100% for everything and everyone, and you may see it at different stages, but it can reduce anxiety in children, or even just feelings of sort of extreme stress all the time. So gentle parenting is a platform for giving space to children to see how their behaviours impact others, or how other people react to their behaviours, and how they can react following that. So a bit like how we talked about a teenager setting boundaries. You would have to model how to do that. But if a teenager has done that and knows how to do that often, they're likely to feel less anxious as they do it through life.
And I think anxiety, that's a big word, isn't it? Those anxious feelings, those feelings of worry. And I think that's the important thing about gentle parenting, is that it gives the explanation. I'm not putting this boundary in just because I'm the adult and you've got to listen. It's about explaining to them about, the why. And I think that's really important to help anyone. If I'm going to say to you, right, you've got to do this, you might be a bit unsure, thinking, I don't know why I need to be doing this, but they're putting a very firm boundary.
The consequences,
And I'm actually feeling a little bit worried here, because I don't understand what exactly is needed of me. So we need to really explain, I need this from you because, and that will end up in this, which is the positives. Or if you don't and you do this, this is what is going to have to happen. And I think that reducing anxiety is all about a child understanding more about what's going on in the world around them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. And I think, brings us on to our next point, really, about the kind of parent-child bond and how it can be improved. And it's not just gentle parenting research, but lots of research will tell you that if you share acceptance, connection, validation, empathy, all of those things with your child, that you are more likely to have a positive relationship with your child. If you provide that supportive and encouraging environment, then children will know what to expect from you at all times. They will feel safer around you, and safer when they are listening to your judgment, when they know you put a boundary in place, and that's in place because they want you to be safe.
And again, when we're talking about parent-child bond, a child that feels respected, a child that has their feelings validated, a child who has empathy, you've got a child there that will be able to trust you as an adult. You'll have a far better emotional bond with your child. They will feel that they can talk to you about their worries and their concerns without feeling that they're going to be, kind of passed aside or rejected in that sense. And I think that's really important, especially when we talked about psychological safety. We talked about in our podcast about happiness. Having a happy child, having a better parent-child bond will ultimately have a happier child and a happier parent. So it's good all round, really. And I think we want to feel connected with our children. There's nothing worse than the feeling that you don't understand your child, or your child doesn't understand you. And I think by having a gentle style of parenting to improve that parent-child bond will actually make it a much easier, happier household.
I agree. And I think, it's hard to understand your child if they don't understand themselves.
Yeah.
And that's why we talked about in the really early stages of modelling how to understand big feelings and to improve their emotional regulation skills. So by explaining to them what you see in them when they're angry, explaining to them how that might feel and letting them kind of confirm or deny that, do you feel hot?
Yeah.
Do you feel shaky? Do you feel all of these things? Does your stomach hurt? As they grow older, they'll understand their own emotions, their own feelings, and will just have a much better sense of self, a better understanding of their emotions. They'll be able to explain that better to yourself and to other adults around them, but also to other people. And being able to understand how you feel is a really important part of being able to understand your own personal boundaries. And so you could only really put them in place if you know yourself, how you feel about them. And a child who doesn't understand their emotions wouldn't be able to put appropriate boundaries in place because they don't know what it means for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, that's key with ourselves in showing in appropriate levels our own emotions, isn't it? It's about explaining to them, when we're having a difficult day. Obviously, when we try to emotionally regulate ourselves and talk about our feelings and emotions to our children, it needs to be done in a very careful and child-centered way. So you wouldn't be wanting to explain to your 4-year-old that you've had a really tough day in work and things like that, because it needs to be done in a way that they can understand. So you can say, I'm feeling a little bit upset today too. I get that, sometimes things don't go our way, and I felt that today too. And I feel a little bit frustrated and annoyed.
Absolutely. And I think, all of these kind of fit nicely with each other, but to improve positive social skills. So we've talked a lot about boundaries when you're out and about in kind of the social world.
Yeah.
Part of being a person, an individual, is that you will eventually socialise with people that are not your parents, people that, and despite trying to keep them safe as much as possible, that can be hard, especially like we talked about teens going into the big, bad, wide world. Positive social skills are so important, and they're important for so many different aspects of life. They're important for learning, they're important for developing friendships, developing relationships, being able to maintain a job. You need to be able to have social skills to be able to work with other people, particularly if you're in, a sector where you would need that. But children can regulate themselves better when, I'm talking about the emotional regulation there, but still it applies, I think. With good emotion regulation, you do develop positive social skills.
Yes, absolutely. That's the thing with social skills, is they're essential, aren't they? Social skills within,
even to book a doctor's appointment or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was essential for adult life, but we think about our children in school, to be able to cope with the demands of all those different children in the classroom, they've got to have good social skills, and I think with the gentle parent and the positives of it is that developing those social skills are essential for not only our children but in adult life.
They are always navigating the social world
at
any point, really, even online.
And that's the thing with gentle parenting. You're giving them those social skills to be able to describe feelings and emotions, and to develop empathy for others. And that all comes with emotional literacy.
Yeah, and the final kind of benefit, and there's lots of them, but these are kind of the main ones, that you increase a child's emotional vocabulary. When children are young, you describe those kind of basics emotions to them: anger, sadness, happiness. But naturally, as they get older, feelings get more complex and they become harder to deal with. They get a little bit more confusing. But if children understand those very basic emotions, it provides a much better platform for them to be able to understand the more complicated ones as they get older.
Okay. Great. So there's lots of benefits there that we've talked about. And gosh, yeah, I think we could talk about this all day long because it's so relevant, isn't it? So what other points do we need to think about then, Ellen?
Like we said, it's not going to be all perfect all the time, is it? But I think if you are considering gentle parenting as a style of parenting, and it doesn't sound similar to what you're doing at the moment, is time is one of the things you need to consider, and that it does require you as a parent to be active and present with your children as much as possible. And that's not always the case for lots of people. Sometimes we work multiple jobs. Sometimes our children are with childcare, with family members, and it's quite unreasonable to ask everyone to gentle parent your child in the same way you would, unless they're listening to this and they fancy adopting it as well. Yeah. But as a parent, you have responsibilities, and that just typically will decrease the amount of time you spend with your children. It's kind of life, and as they get older, they do spend more time away from you. So it is difficult to focus on parenting in a specific way consistently. Yeah. But like we said earlier, you don't have to do it all the time. Yeah. So I wouldn't, Yeah,
because sometimes, I guess, when we're having those difficult moments as well, sometimes we're not able to do that at that moment.
No, and I think that's okay. Yeah. It's just worth considering that you can't do it all the time.
Yeah. And then don't give up on it. Don't think, oh gosh, I've not done it and it's not working. You've got to give these things time. It's a skill to be able to, gentle parent, and it's certainly something that needs to be developed over time and practiced, isn't it?
And any change takes time, and this is the same. Challenges of setting boundaries. It's difficult. Setting boundaries with your children is difficult because what a child's going to do most likely is rebel against those boundaries. And the key here is consistency, as we've talked about. Again, it fits into time. Don't give up straight away. More consistent and clear you are with those boundaries, the more your child will understand. It will be challenging. That is the point of setting a boundary, is that if you didn't, then everything would be easy because your child would do what they wanted all the time and you wouldn't have to worry about it. But that's not safe and that's not realistic. Going into an adult world, everybody has boundaries in some way or another. And it's important that we learn how to accept them and work with them. And like you said, negotiate them. But
and I think, again, another challenge of setting boundaries is sometimes when we are in the state of setting those boundaries, we can feel a little bit frustrated ourselves because we're obviously dealing with a behaviour that we are finding challenging, aren't we? And being mindful of as a parent to think, right, is the boundary that I'm about to set, because I'm a bit frustrated and annoyed, appropriate? Okay, so just be mindful. We've all been there when, that's it, you're grounded for life.
Never leaving the house again. You're done.
That's it. But just try to be considerate, and do you know what? If you accidentally set the wrong boundary, you can go back to it. You can say, do you know what? I think that was a little bit, harsh, or actually, do you know what? I think I need to change it. I don't think that's going to work for us because, we've all got to go to Caitlin's party next weekend, So always be mindful of that. Sometimes we can set inappropriate boundaries based on the emotion that we're feeling.
Of course.
But again,
and you'll recognize that in yourself.
Boundary setting is essential for life, because ultimately they're going to be an adult in a world where, as you said, there are boundaries, there are laws. They are going to have a job where there's going to be boundaries. You can't just turn up for work whenever you want and leave whenever you want. You can't pick and choose what you do. Again, our children are going to have to get used to that there are going to be leaders in their life that will set boundaries, and they are going to have to follow them.
Because if you don't set them, someone else will.
Exactly.
And it will be much harder for them to understand that later on in life.
Yes, absolutely. And again, if you don't set boundaries in the early years, you try setting boundaries for a teenager who's never had boundaries, you are it's going to be a challenge, that's for sure.
Something else to think about is challenging parental patterns. Arguably one of the most difficult things you will have to do. But part of that is acknowledging how you were parented, what experiences you had, what was challenging about that, what you enjoyed about that, what you thought, worked well, and whether or not that experience will be helpful for your child. If you parented the same way you were parented, is that what you'd like for your child? If it was a difficult upbringing, what parts of that do you find that you're carrying with you that you would like to get rid of? Because it's really hard to reflect on ourselves and our experiences, and I think it would take some time to be able to do that as an adult.
Yeah.
Especially when you've kind of tried to forget about it in some ways.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of parents, you know, like myself, brought up in the 80s where it's, you know, obviously we were smacked then, and there was a very different type of parenting style, I would say, generally, not everyone. But obviously, smacking is illegal, and rightly so. So we might be thinking, okay, years ago, I was parented in this way. I don't want that for my child. But it doesn't mean like completely doing the opposite.
No, it doesn't.
You know?
No.
And that's one thing to be mindful of, is just because maybe you grew up with very firm, harsh boundaries, or restrictive type parenting, authoritarian type parenting, doesn't mean that we just flip and do the complete opposite and just let our children choose whatever they want from life. And if they want to go to school, they can. If they don't want to, that's fine. You know, that's obviously a huge thing. But we are seeing a lot of that on social media, where parents are choosing to show their life with their children by saying, I'm allowing my child to choose everything that they want to do.
I don't know if you've seen, but it's come up quite a lot on my TikTok, is parents, and I don't really have an opinion on this yet because I don't know enough about it, but parents allowing their child well-being days from school. Right. So their child can say to them, do you know what, I'm not feeling it today. I'd like to stay home.
Okay.
And those well-being days can turn from once a month to once a week to a couple of times a week. And as great it is for you to acknowledge your child's emotional, physical, psychological well-being, there are ways to do that that addresses the actual cause.
Absolutely.
Rather than saying, okay, have a day off. Because like we said, in adult life, I would love to ring into work and say, do you know what, I've had a guts full, I'm not coming in, goodbye. But unfortunately, society
you wouldn't have a job, would you?
I would not be in work, I'd still be in bed. But you know, and like we said, that's not addressing anything.
And that's not developing resilience either, is it?
Absolutely not. And you know, to say to your child, if you're feeling overwhelmed, stay in bed. Why are they feeling overwhelmed? What can I do to help you stop feeling overwhelmed?
Absolutely. I think that's something that's really important that we reflect on, is about, okay, yes, our child is needing something, but what's feeding that, you know, and that's what we need to look at, not what is the symptom, but what's the cause. So I agree with you. So a child, you know, requesting a wellbeing day, that sounds lovely. You know,
the ideas.
What is far better for you, as you said, is, okay, what is causing you to feel like you need a wellbeing day? Okay, let's talk about that. I can't authorize you to have wellbeing days, and I'm really sorry. That's not something that I think is good for you. Because actually we need to look at what we can do to help you to feel better about going to school, and what could be the issues that we need to address, instead of hiding away from, you know, in a so-called wellbeing day.
Absolutely. And
interesting.
Something else to think about is the structure.
Okay.
You will most likely live in a household where there could be other children. You also have a partner, possibly. You could have other adults living in the house. You may live with your parents, with your brothers and sisters, whoever else is there.
Step families as well.
Step families, of course. When you are, we could call it collaborating with your child in a gentle parenting way, you are likely going to change the dynamic of your family or your household, because it will apply to everyone. And if everybody adopts a different approach, that's really confusing for a child. And that's why we talk about consistency. It's not as simple as just having one parent, one child in a house all the time. And that's where things can kind of become unstuck. So being open and honest with your household about, this is something I want to try and this is how I want to do it. You know,
and the why. This is why I want to do it.
It's because some people might assume that kind of that parent-child relationship can appear more like friends rather than the dynamic, which is the parent and the child. Clear, consistent boundaries. So, and that's not what it is. Of course, you can be friends with your child. That's not to say you can't have friendship-like elements with your child, but ultimately, you are the adult responsible for their well-being.
Absolutely.
And being a gentle parent doesn't mean you're just friends.
No.
It means that you are caring for your child and giving them opportunities to learn and develop in a safe way with you.
Yeah, and on that, I think it's really important that, that we don't just slip into those stereotypes of, oh, well, I'm the firm one, and
good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, and he's he's the soft approach, so I've got to put in the boundaries, whereas he does doesn't do that, and that you need to be together. So whomever you live with, whomever is the other adult in the household, whether that be a step parent or whatever, or partner, you both need to be on the same hymn sheet.
Yes, of course.
Because otherwise you're going to have inconsistent parenting, which is going to be far more challenging for you to implement any one style, because there's going to be a number of boundaries that are misunderstood, and it's very confusing for children to live in a household where we got one parent that is one style and another parent that's another. And again, when we're thinking about our children who may be from with parents live at different addresses, that we've got parents that run a different house in different addresses, so I know that can be a great challenge, isn't it, for parents to be able to discuss, how they're going to collaboratively parent a child whilst also living at different addresses. It needs to be something that, again, if you are wanting to implement that, is explaining the why to the other parent.
Yeah, you can model explaining why to another adult.
Yeah.
It is a change. It is a lifestyle change, and it's really up to kind of you and how your dynamic works, whether you think it would fit for you. But change takes time and it takes patience.
Yeah.
And bringing us on to our final point, it takes patience.
Yes.
Gentle parenting style does ask parents to have patience. And like we said, you will not have it all the time.
No.
That is life.
Yeah.
Even a child won't have patience all the time, and we'll be modelling that to them. And it can be challenging. And I think in some ways it may lead to kind of a lack of motivation, because you think, you know what, I'm running out of patience. But I think it's like we said, if this style fits in something you would like to try, patience and time is key. Clear and consistent boundaries are also key. So it's just worth thinking about those things, really.
Thank you. So, Ellen, we always do our top tips, our Tonnau's top tips for today. Can you tell us?
Yeah,
quickly.
So I guess just to reiterate that gentle parent is not permissive. So it's not just letting your children do what they want. And we've really thoroughly explained that throughout this kind of YouTube channels. And it can be for all children. It's not for specific types of children. It might be more difficult with specific types of children, but the research has shown that it does have positive effects for every type of child.
And every age as well.
And every age, of course. Parenting's not perfect, and don't expect that being or adopting a gentle parenting approach will make you a perfect parent, or that you even have to be a perfect parent. That is not fact. None of us are. We can improve our parent-child relationships, as we explained, through connection, empathy, validation. Setting boundaries is challenging. Any new boundary, any new rule is going to be a challenge, but that's where your consistency is key, really. And don't believe the myths. Don't go online and Google gentle parenting and watch all the TikTok videos and think, oh my God, this is gentle parenting, I'm not doing that. Because it's not always true. It's misconceptions a lot of the time, as is everything online.
Yes, always.
Don't believe what you see online all the time, unless it's coming from a reliable source.
Thank you, Ellen. Right, on to our questions and answers section. Okay, let me see what questions we've had in today. Right. So, Ellen, do you want to read the questions out?
Yeah, of course. So we've had one question come in, and they've asked, well, they said, it's really hard to do gentle parenting when my child's having a screaming fit because they can't have McDonald's. What can I do?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Absolutely. I love this, screaming fits. Okay, so yes, it's hard to do any type of parenting when your child is having a screaming fit, especially when it's over something like I can't have McDonald's, For us, we might be thinking, can't afford McDonald's. It's not healthy to have another McDonald's this week, whatever it may be, or whatever they are having this so-called screaming fit about. I can understand that you would be feeling probably frustrated yourself, feeling like your patience is wearing thin, finding it really difficult to empathize with this child because, it's a very, big reaction to something. What I believe is what you're saying is quite small, not having McDonald's. So I understand that is a really difficult time. What I would be saying is that when your child is having a screaming fit, they are not in that frame of mind that they're able to respond to your words.
Yeah.
So what we would say is that they're flipping the lid. So when we're trying to communicate with a child who is having a screaming fit, what we need to be mindful of is that we need an emotion coach. Okay, first and foremost is emotion coach, is to be able to say, I can see that you're really, really upset. Okay, now is not the time for us to have a conversation about this. So I really need to help you to feel better. Let's go for a walk. Let's go out into the garden on the trampoline. Let's go and have a sit down and cuddle. Whatever you think would work for your child, because each child is different. Some children want to jump on trampoline when they're really frustrated. Others want to just have a cuddle and a cry because they're so upset. You'll be able to understand which one that would work best for your child at that point. Do that. And it's not until your child is at the point where they're no longer screaming, is that you can implement those gentle parenting strategies. So timing is essential when you're trying to deliver your gentle parenting technique, because we can't negotiate with a child when they're in that frame of mind, because it really isn't the right time. Because again, we can't try and convince our children not to be in a screaming fit when they're in a screaming fit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's impossible, because they are so dysregulated. The part of the brain that you're trying to communicate is completely offline, as we'd say. So yeah, pick your time and do it when they are in a far better ability to be able to calm down and have that parenting style delivered to them.
Yeah, thank you. We've got one more question.
Okay.
So this writer has written in, I was parented in a really harsh way and I don't want to put my kids through that. How do I change that?
Oh, okay. We touched upon this, didn't we, just briefly?
Yeah.
Yes, that's tough, isn't it? That to go through a childhood where you were parented in a very harsh way. And I can completely understand why you wouldn't want to put your kids through that. How do I change that is what they're asking. Ultimately, you are fully aware of the way that you were parented and you felt that it was really harsh. So again, you already know what not to do.
Yeah,
okay?
It's that reflection on what didn't work
what
for you.
didn't work, isn't it? And also, you're already aware that you don't want to put your children through that. Now, what can be really difficult for parents who are parented in a certain way is that ultimately we are brought up and we learn from our environment and the way that we were brought up. And I think what can be really difficult for our parents who felt they were parented in a really harsh way is that sometimes, unfortunately, when we are feeling difficult emotions with parenting, with our kids, is that sometimes it can frighten us in a way that we think, oh my gosh, I'm starting to behave just like my mum or dad, whomever it was. And that can be really upsetting for us. And that's when we can feel a lot of guilt and shame, because we're thinking, oh my gosh, I desperately don't want to be like my mother or father, whomever it was, and I feel guilty now for the fact that I was nearly behaving in the same way, which is what I really don't want to do. So it's going to be really tough for you, because it's something that unfortunately sometimes that we naturally go to do because of the way we learnt. But the fact that you're recognizing that, it's really important. I would say, number one, you need to check in with yourself. So if you're starting to feel, I want to, my child is behaving in a way that I feel like I need to put boundaries in, I don't want to be harsh, but actually my emotions are starting to be triggered here, it might be a time where you need to take 5, take a deep breath, get outside, have a break from, as long as your child is safe in the home, have some time to really collect your thoughts and really prepare yourself. Because again, what we said about gentle parenting is that it takes time.
Yeah,
you need to practice. Absolutely. Come back in, and when you are calmer, to be able to deliver the gentle parenting style, because that's what's really important, is checking in with yourself. And that's how you're going to change the way that you respond naturally, because again, that's the way you were brought up, is really to take that time and be really mindful of, I don't want to do it this way. I want to do it in a gentle parenting way. I'm going to take 5 so that I can just put myself together, get a script in a way in your mind, prepared so that you can go back in there, because sometimes our kids are very clever and they can come up with all these things and these reasons of why not and why, and actually we need to be prepared for that. So I think it's really important to prepare yourself as much as you can, and just keep reading the books, listen to this podcast over again, listen to some of our other podcasts about confidence and resilience, because that can be really helpful, and also helping our children to be happy, because it gives strategies on to be able to communicate with our children in a far better way that isn't harsh, and that can help reframe and reskill you in a way that is far more in line with gentle parenting rather than the harsh way that you were brought up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope that's been helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone today. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for joining us for our Tonnau talks on myth-busting gentle parenting. Please join us for another session of our Tonnau talks. And the QR code that you can see that our next ones are available at the beginning of this Tonnau talks. And we welcome you back next time. Thank you very much.